It began early in the morning. Before the city had fully woken up, two vehicles stopped outside my house. Dark windows, engines still running, as if they were afraid to stay too long. They didn't show a warrant, they didn't explain anything. They simply said my name and told me to come with them. In moments like that, you don't argue. You feel it in your bones that arguing won't save you. As they led me away, I kept thinking this was a mistake. I had done nothing wrong. My only crime was owning land that someone else wanted. The holding facility smelled like cold metal and old silence. They took my phone, my watch, emptied my pockets one by one. When one of them reached for my ring, I instinctively closed my fist. He laughed and stepped back. "Keep it," he said. "You won't need it for long." Those words stayed with me. The cell was small, harshly lit, designed to erase time. No windows, no clock, just a bench bolted to the wall, and a floor marked by scratches left by people who had waited here before me. On the wall, someone had carved a sentence with a sharp object. Truth screams in this place, but no one listens. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt meaningless there. Later, a man in a clean suit arrived with a folder under his arm. He didn't introduce himself. He spoke as if we were already mid-conversation. He told me there were irregularities in my property records. He said cooperation would make things easier. Cooperation meant signatures. Silence, letting go of everything my father had built. When I refused, his smile didn't fade. "Truth isn't decided here," he said calmly. "Ownership is." That was when I understood. This wasn't about law. It was about theft, dressed up as procedure. Night fell slowly, the way it does in places where daylight has no meaning. The cell grew colder. Somewhere down the corridor, keys clinked, footsteps echoed, then disappeared. I turned the ring on my finger absent-mindedly. It was plain gold, nothing special to look at, but it carried weight. My father had given it to me years ago and said only one thing: never take this off when things get dark. I didn't know why, I just believed him. The warden passed during his routine rounds. He had walked this corridor 1,000 times, seen faces far more desperate than mine. But this time he stopped. His eyes weren't on me, they were fixed on my hand. The light reflected off the ring. For a moment he said nothing, then he stepped closer. "Where did you get that?" he asked quietly. I told him the truth. No drama, no pleading. Something changed in his expression. Recognition maybe, or shock. He glanced down the corridor, making sure we were alone, then leaned closer and spoke so softly I almost missed it. "Tonight," he said, "you will know." And then he walked away. Sleep never came. Every sound felt louder, every shadow heavier. My mind raced through possibilities, interrogation, transfer, worse. When the cell door finally opened after midnight, two guards stood there. Their faces were different now, less confident, less cruel. They didn't take me to court. They didn't take me back to questioning. They took me upstairs. The office was large, dimly lit, and unnervingly quiet. The warden stood behind a desk with my file open in front of him. On top of the papers lay an old photograph. In it, a younger man stood proudly, wearing the same ring. The warden looked at me and said, "You've been placed in a cell meant to silence you. But the people who planned this forgot something." He tapped the photograph lightly. They forgot who that ring belongs to. At that moment, I realized the holding cell hadn't been my prison. It had been a test, and the night was far from over. The guards didn't speak as they led me down the corridor. Their silence felt heavier than threats. I tried to read their faces, but they avoided my eyes, as if looking at me too long might implicate them in something they didn't fully understand yet. The office door closed behind me with a dull, final sound. The warden gestured for me to sit, then took his time circling the desk, studying the file, the photograph, and finally, the ring on my finger. I could tell he was weighing words carefully, choosing what could be said and what had to remain buried. "That ring," he said at last, "was issued to only 3 men. I felt my chest tighten. Your father was one of them." He continued, "Not officially, not on paper, but this system has layers most people never see." He opened the file and turned it toward me. Pages of reports, stamped approvals, signatures I didn't recognize. My name appeared again and again, always in the margins, always connected to land parcels and development plans I had never agreed to. Someone had been building a case around my silence long before I was arrested. "Why me?" I asked. The warden didn't answer immediately. He walked to the window and pulled the blinds just enough to see the parking lot below. A black sedan sat with its engine running. "Because you inherited more than property," he said quietly, "and because some people believe you won't fight back." He turned to face me. "They moved you to the holding cell to break you, to scare you into signing. Once you do, the paperwork becomes clean, legal, untouchable. My mouth felt dry, and if I don't, he met my gaze, then tonight becomes dangerous. He closed the file and slid it aside. Your father helped expose a land grab like this years ago. Same pattern, same people, different names. He refused to cooperate too. I leaned forward. What happened to him? The warden's jaw tightened. Officially. Heart failure, unofficially. He exhaled slowly. The system doesn't forgive men who don't bend. A sharp knock interrupted us. The warden straightened instantly, his expression neutral again. A guard entered, whispering something in his ear. I caught only fragments, calls, pressure, signatures waiting. Take him back, the warden said firmly. For now. As they escorted me away, he added, without looking at me, whatever they put in front of you, don't sign. Back in the cell, the walls felt closer than before. Knowledge did that, fear had shape now. I replayed the warden's words over and over, trying to decide whether he was protecting me or simply delaying the inevitable. An hour later, the suited man returned, this time with 2 others. They placed documents on a metal tray and slid it through the bars. Just formalities, he said smoothly. Sign tonight, walk out tomorrow. I scanned the pages. The language was precise, surgical. By the end, I would own nothing. Not the land, not the house, not even the right to challenge it. I looked up at him, and if I don't, his smile thinned, then you stay. Accidents happen to people who stay. I pushed the papers back untouched. Something flickered in his eyes, annoyance, then calculation. He gathered the documents and stood. We'll talk again. After he left, the corridor stayed quiet for a long time. Then, just before dawn, the lights dimmed slightly. Footsteps approached, slower this time, deliberate. The warden stopped outside my cell. He didn't open the door, he didn't speak at first. They've accelerated the plan. He said finally, which means we're running out of time. I stood, then why am I still here? Because the truth needs leverage. He replied, and leverage needs proof. He slipped a small folded paper through the bars. Memorize this, then destroy it. I unfolded it just enough to see names, positions, dates, powerful people tied together by a single line of transactions. This, he said, is why they're afraid of that ring. Before I could ask anything else, he walked away, leaving me alone with a choice that could either save me or finish what they started. And somewhere above us, engines kept running, waiting for the night to decide who would walk free. I memorized the names until they burned into my mind. I read them again and again, forcing myself to remember the order, the spelling, the dates beside them. When I was sure, I tore the paper into the smallest pieces I could manage and flushed them away. Watching as proof of everything wrong with this place disappeared into pipes that had swallowed worse secrets before. Morning arrived without light. The cell brightened artificially, the way it always did, stripping away any sense of relief a real sunrise might have brought. I hadn't slept, but my fear had shifted into something sharper. Fear could be used against you. Knowledge, on the other hand, made people nervous. They brought me breakfast I couldn't touch. My thoughts were louder than my hunger. Every sound in the corridor made me stand, expecting guards, papers, threats. Instead, hours passed with nothing but silence. That silence felt planned. In the afternoon, they moved me again. This time not to the office, but to an interrogation room. The walls were pale, the table bolted down, the camera in the corner blinking steadily. 2 men waited for me. One I recognized from the paperwork visits. The other I didn't, older, calmer, with eyes that didn't rush. The older man spoke first. You're making this difficult. I'm making it honest, I replied. He smiled faintly. Honesty is expensive. They slid new documents across the table. Different wording, same outcome. I noticed something else too. My father's name appeared once, carefully hidden inside a reference line. I looked up. You're not even pretending anymore. The younger man leaned forward. You don't understand the position you're in. I met his gaze. I understand exactly why you're scared. That was when the room changed. Not physically, but emotionally. The older man's smile vanished. He studied me more closely now, like a problem that refused to solve itself. You spoke to the warden, he said. I said nothing. He's loyal to procedure, the man continued. Sometimes too loyal, that can be corrected. The threat hung in the air, unspoken but clear. They left me alone for what felt like an hour. When they returned, their tone had hardened. No more persuasion, only pressure. They talked about delays, extended holding, complications that could keep me buried for months. I listened calmly, because panic was exactly what they wanted. When they finally escorted me back, I noticed something new. Guards at the corners I hadn't seen before. Cameras repositioned. People were watching more closely now. That night the warden came again, but this time, he opened the door and stepped inside the cell. "We don't have much time," he said quietly. "They're preparing to move you out of here, somewhere quieter." My stomach dropped. Where? Officially, a transfer, unofficially. He shook his head. "Places like that don't leave witnesses." He looked at the ring again, then reached into his pocket and placed something in my hand. A small key attached to a faded tag. "This opens a locker in the evidence room." He said, "Inside is a drive. Your father left it there years ago." He trusted only one symbol enough to connect it to. "The ring," I whispered. He nodded. "If anything happens to me, that drive is your voice." "What about you?" I asked. For the first time, he hesitated. "I've lived with compromise long enough." Footsteps echoed outside. He stepped back quickly, his face returning to its neutral mask. As he left, he said one last thing without turning around. "Tonight, they think they're ending a problem. They don't realize they're waking something up." I sat back on the bench, the key clenched in my fist, fully aware that the game had shifted. This was no longer about my property. It was about finishing what my father started, or disappearing like he did. And somewhere in the building, decisions were being made that couldn't be undone. The transfer order came just after midnight. I knew it before anyone said a word. The air changed when decisions like that were finalized. Guards moved faster, avoided eye contact, followed instructions without questions. When they opened my cell, they didn't bring paperwork. They brought restraints. As they led me down a side corridor I hadn't seen before, my hand brushed the ring instinctively, as if it could anchor me to something solid. We passed offices that were dark, storage rooms sealed shut, and finally a heavy steel door that opened into a service hallway. At the far end, an elevator waited with its doors already open. The warden was there. He stood slightly to the side, arms crossed, posture relaxed enough to look casual to anyone who didn't know better. Our eyes met for half a second. That was all, but in that glance, I saw confirmation. This was the moment. "Hold," he said calmly. One of the guards hesitated. "Sir, we're on orders." "I know whose orders," the warden replied. "And I know the protocol for internal transfers. This isn't it." Silence stretched. The older guard shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. Finally, he nodded and stepped back. The warden turned to me. "Evidence room, now." He led me down a narrow stairwell, bypassing cameras and main corridors. My heart pounded, not from fear anymore, but from urgency. We reached a locked door marked Storage E3. He opened it, ushered me inside, and locked it behind us. The evidence room was colder than the cells. Rows of metal lockers lined the walls, each tagged and numbered. The warden pointed. "Third row, 7th locker." My hands shook as I inserted the key. It turned smoothly, as if it had been waiting for me. Inside was a small black drive, sealed in a clear bag, and beneath it, a folded note. I recognized my father's handwriting instantly. "If you're reading this, they tried again." My chest tightened. The drive wasn't just data. It was years of records, transactions, recordings, scanned documents, names that matched the list I'd memorized. But there was more: video, audio, proof that tied land seizures, false charges, and sudden deaths together into a single pattern. "He knew," I said quietly. "He knew they'd come back." The warden nodded. "He knew the system never forgets unfinished business." An alarm sounded somewhere above us, distant but real. "They've realized you're not where you're supposed to be." He said, "You need to leave. Now." "How?" I asked. He reached into his jacket and handed me an ID badge. Not his. Someone else's. Maintenance exit. Van outside. Keys are under the seat. "What about you?" He met my eyes steadily. "I'll slow them down." I hesitated. "They'll destroy you." A faint smile crossed his face. "They already tried. Years ago. Tonight I stop hiding." He opened a rear door and motioned for me to go. As I stepped out into the night air, he said one last thing. "Don't expose them loudly. Expose them precisely." The van engine started on the first try. I drove without headlights until I reached the outer road, then merged into the city like any other late-night worker heading home. My hands were steady now. My fear had turned into focus. Somewhere behind me, sirens began to wail. I didn't know if the warden would walk out of that building. I didn't know how much time I had before they found me again. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. They hadn't put me in a holding cell to silence me. They had put me there to remind me why my father never stopped fighting. And now, neither would I. The city streets were quiet, but every shadow felt alive. I drove with the windows down, listening to the soft hum of the engine and the faint echo of sirens fading behind me. The drive was tense, One wrong turn and everything, the drive, the key, the ring, even my life, could vanish in an instant. I found a safe spot, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts. It wasn't much, but it gave me cover and time. I locked the doors behind me and sat in the dark, staring at the black drive in my hands. It contained more than just evidence. It contained the map to everything my father had built, and everything they had tried to destroy. I remembered his words, whispered years ago when I was still naive. Power doesn't lie in wealth. It lies in proof, in knowledge, and in the courage to use both wisely. I had carried his ring, but now I realized the weight of it wasn't just symbolic. It was the key to everything. I plugged the drive into my laptop and began scanning through the files. Names of powerful people, their transactions, their threats, every lie meticulously documented. Then I found something else, a list of those complicit in my arrest, those who had signed off behind the scenes, all marked with dates and locations. Every step I had gone through in the holding cell, every movement, was accounted for by their own actions. Hours passed, I felt exhaustion creeping in, but I couldn't stop. Every piece of data was a weapon, and time was a luxury I didn't have. I realized the ring had done more than catch the warden's attention. It had given me leverage they never expected. Suddenly, a noise outside the warehouse made me freeze. Footsteps, soft, deliberate, not the hurried pace of someone searching, but calculated, someone confident, someone who knew what they were doing. I ducked into the shadows, clutching the laptop and drive. The footsteps approached the door. Then a voice, calm, chilling. "You shouldn't be here," it said. I peeked through a crack in the wall. Two men, suited and armed, were scanning the warehouse. My mind raced, escape routes, exits, distractions. The night was no longer a quiet alleyway for hiding, it was a battlefield. I remembered the warden's last words, "Don't expose them loudly, expose them precisely." I needed a plan. One wrong move and everything would be gone. But I wasn't the same person who had been thrown into that holding cell hours ago. Fear had sharpened into focus. Every detail I had memorized, every note on the drive, every pattern my father had left, it all came together. The ring glinted under the moonlight, through the warehouse window. It was more than a symbol now. It was my shield, my guide, and my promise to my father. I took a deep breath. The night had begun, and so had the reckoning. I slipped quietly toward the rear exit, keeping to the shadows. The two men hadn't noticed me yet, their attention divided between scanning the warehouse and speaking in low tones. Every step I took felt measured, like walking a tightrope over a pit I couldn't see. One false move, and I would be caught or worse. Outside, the night air was sharp, almost electric. I ducked behind a stack of crates and surveyed the area. The van the warden had mentioned was still parked a short distance away, engine off but ready. The driver's seat was empty. He trusted me to get this far alone. I moved fast, silent as a shadow, hugging the walls and slipping between dimly lit alleys. My mind raced through every detail the warden had given me. Escape wasn't enough. I needed leverage, proof, and safety. The ring on my finger felt heavier now, a constant reminder of the stakes. Then I heard voices behind me, not the men in the warehouse, but other footsteps, closer, faster. I pressed myself against the wall, barely breathing, as two more figures appeared. They weren't suited, casual, but their posture screamed authority, law enforcement, or at least a version of it that answered to someone far above. One of them stopped, scanning the street, and muttered something into a radio. My pulse throbbed. Every plan I had made in the last few hours flashed before my eyes. I realized I couldn't just run. I had to confront what was coming. I ducked into a narrow alley and spotted a fire escape. It was risky, but my only chance. Climbing silently, I reached the roof and crouched low, heart pounding. From this vantage point, I could see the warehouse, the surrounding streets, and the van waiting below. The city lights stretched in the distance, indifferent to the chaos below. I pulled the drive closer and reviewed my options. The information it held wasn't just mine to use. It was a weapon against every person who had tried to trap me, cheat me, or erase me. Every name, every transaction, every hidden document, it was all here in my hands. And then I heard it, the sound that froze me in place. A helicopter. Low, fast, mechanical whirring cutting through the night air. I could see the shadow of its blades, slicing the darkness. They weren't leaving this to the streets. The van started, the warehouse now under surveillance, and I realized something critical. I was no longer just running for myself. I was running to expose every single person who had believed they could silence me. The night was closing in, but I felt a strange calm. Every fear, every betrayal, Every moment in that holding cell had prepared me for this. I was ready, not just to survive, but to fight back. With a final glance at the city below, I leapt across the gap between roofs, landing silently on the next building. The game had escalated, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I was no longer just a pawn. I was a player. I landed softly on the next rooftop, heart racing, lungs burning from the sudden exertion. The city stretched out beneath me, indifferent and silent, but I knew danger was closing in. Every sound, the distant siren, the helicopter overhead, the muffled voices below, was a warning. I wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. I was fighting for the truth. I found a narrow ledge along the side of the building and moved cautiously, keeping out of sight from street-level patrols. The drive in my hand seemed heavier with every step, as if the weight of the evidence it carried had grown exponentially since I first held it. Every name, every signature, every document had the potential to bring down those who had conspired against me and my father. Suddenly, a shout rang out from below. The two men from the warehouse had discovered my escape. Flashlights scanned the streets, cutting through the shadows, and the helicopter's beam swung dangerously close to where I crouched. My mind raced. I needed a plan, a way to stay ahead, to turn the hunters into the hunted. I remember the warden's words, expose them precisely. Precision meant patience. Hasty moves would get me killed, or worse, leave me exposed without any leverage. I ducked behind a vent, catching my breath, and mapped out my route. Across the rooftops, the city offered blind spots and alleyways. It was a maze, but I knew it better than anyone else in this moment. Then I noticed movement on the adjacent rooftop. A shadow detached itself from the darkness, another operative. They weren't alone. The conspiracy was bigger than I had imagined. Someone was watching my every move. Anticipating my escape, my pulse quickened. I took a deep breath, keeping my focus sharp. I needed to split their attention. The drive held the key, but I couldn't just reveal it yet. I had to bait them, draw them into a trap, and expose them where it mattered most. With calculated steps, I leapt to a closer rooftop, then another, moving like a ghost through the night. Behind me, voices grew louder. The helicopter closer, the city shrinking in a blur as adrenaline propelled me forward. Finally, I reached a section of the city I knew well, an old abandoned factory, a place my father had once used as a safe house. I slipped inside, the metal doors groaning under my weight. The darkness enveloped me, hiding every trace of my arrival. I could hear them searching outside, shouting, frustrated. Inside, I examined the drive and plotted my next moves. Every piece of evidence, every name, every date, it had to be delivered strategically. If I made a single misstep, all of this would be lost. But if I succeeded, I could dismantle an entire network of corruption, betrayal, and greed. I allowed myself a moment to feel the weight of my father's legacy in my hands, the ring glinting faintly under the dim light. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about justice, about proving that those who thought they were untouchable could be exposed. Outside, the city was tense. Somewhere, the helicopter hovered. The hunters were relentless. But for the first time, I felt the shift. They were chasing, but I was leading the game now. And as I moved deeper into the factory, I whispered to myself, tonight they will know. The factory smelled of rust, oil, and forgotten time. I moved through it slowly, every step measured, every sound controlled. Moonlight filtered through broken windows, slicing the darkness into pale strips. This place had once been alive with noise and labor. Now it was perfect for hiding truths people would kill to keep buried. I reached the inner office where my father had once worked. The door was still there, crooked but standing. Inside, beneath a loose floor panel, I found what I hoped for, an old power source, a dusty router, and a secure terminal he had set up years ago. He had planned for this longer than I ever knew. As I powered everything on, my hands steadied. Fear no longer controlled me, purpose did. I began uploading selected files from the drive. Not everything. Not yet, just enough. Encrypted packets sent to 3 different places, an investigative journalist my father trusted, an independent legal watchdog group, and a secure cloud dead drop that would auto-release if something happened to me. Precision, not noise. While the upload progressed, I reviewed the last folder on the drive. I hadn't opened it before. The name stopped me cold. Tonight. Inside was a short video file. I hesitated, then played it. My father appeared on the screen. Older than I remembered, tired but calm. He looked straight into the camera. If you're seeing this, he said, they've already made their move. And that means you're stronger than they expected. My throat tightened. I couldn't destroy them back then. He continued, not without becoming like them. So I documented everything. I planted evidence where it would survive me. And I left you the ring so the right people would recognize it when the time came. He paused, then added, trust carefully. Even allies will hesitate when power pushes back. But remember this, systems fear records and corrupt men fear light. The video ended. Footsteps echoed outside the factory. They had found me. Flashlights swept across broken windows. Voices barked orders. I shut down the terminal and slipped deeper into the building, moving through familiar paths my father had once taught me. I could hear them now, too close, too confident. A voice called out, calm and authoritative. You've gone far enough, come out, we can still fix this. I recognized it. The older man from the interrogation room. I stepped into the light. His eyes flicked to my hand, to the ring. His jaw tightened. You have no idea how many people you're threatening. I know exactly how many, I said. I memorized their names. The room went silent. You won't win, he said quietly. Even if you expose us, the system will protect itself. I met his gaze without blinking. That's why I didn't give everything to one place. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. Sirens sounded in the distance, real ones this time. Not controlled, not redirected. Someone else had taken notice. Phones began buzzing around the room. The men with him checked their screens. Tension rising, whispers spreading. The balance was shifting. I took a step back into the shadows. This isn't about revenge, I said. It's about ending the pattern. He stared at me, calculating losses now instead of threats. As I disappeared into the darkness of the factory's rear exit, I knew this phase was over. The chase would continue, but it had changed direction. They were no longer deciding what to do with me. They were deciding how much of themselves they could save. And somewhere in the city, the first cracks were already showing. The night broke apart faster than I expected. By the time I reached the river road, my phone, when I hadn't owned an hour earlier, began vibrating nonstop. Unknown numbers, encrypted alerts, missed calls stacking on top of each other like warnings. I ignored them and kept walking, letting the cold air clear my head. What mattered now was distance and time. Behind me, the factory lights flared, then died. Someone had cut the power. Someone else was already trying to clean the scene. I found shelter beneath an old bridge, the concrete still warm from the day's heat. There, in the half-dark, I checked the secure channel my father had set up years ago. One message had already landed. We received the files, they're real. Another followed seconds later. They're panicking. That word settled something inside me. Panic meant mistakes. Across the city, those mistakes were already unfolding. Accounts frozen without warning. Development permits quietly revoked. 2 officials suddenly unavailable for comment. The machine that had moved so smoothly against me was grinding now, gears slipping as it tried to reverse without tearing itself apart. But systems don't unravel without resistance. A car slowed near the bridge. Headlights cut across the shadows, stopping just short of where I stood. A single figure stepped out, not armed, not hiding. The warden. He looked exhausted, his uniform wrinkled, his face marked with something between relief and resignation. They suspended me, he said simply. Internal review. I nodded, I'm sorry. He shook his head. Don't be, it bought you time, and it forced their hand. He handed me a burner phone. They're trying to negotiate now. Through intermediaries, promises, threats dressed as mercy. What do they want? I asked, though I already knew. Silence, he replied, and the drive. I looked at the river, dark and steady. They can't have it. They know, he said. That's why they're scared. He hesitated, then added, your father would have been proud. Those words hit harder than anything that night. Sirens echoed again, closer this time. Real police, real oversight. Not everyone was compromised, just enough to make the rest dangerous. I can't stay visible, the warden said. Neither can you, not yet. He gave me an address. There are people who will protect you. Not because of the ring, but because of what you're exposing. Before leaving, he looked at me once more. This ends one of 2 ways. They bury the truth quietly, or it comes out so clean they can't touch it. I watched him drive away, knowing I might never see him again. By dawn, the first story broke online. Not the full truth, just a fracture, but fractures spread. By noon, a second story followed. Names appeared, connections drawn. By evening, arrests were being discussed publicly. I sat in a safe room, watching the world shift on a screen, realizing something important. Justice doesn't arrive like a storm. It arrives like pressure. And the pressure was finally unbearable. By the next night, the city itself felt different. as if the balance had shifted under everyone's feet. Those who had tried to bury me, erase me, and steal what was mine were now scrambling. Emails, phone calls, and internal alerts flew across offices, whispers of betrayal and fear growing louder by the hour. I stayed in the safe house, moving only when necessary. The ring on my finger felt heavier now, not because of its weight, but because of what it represented. Every document, every recording, every name I had memorized or transmitted had become a weapon against a network of corruption that had thrived for decades. The first confrontation came in the middle of the night. A car rolled silently up to the safe house. Two men, dressed as couriers, approached carrying nothing but briefcases. I knew instantly it was a trap. Their confidence gave them away. I let them approach, shadows hiding my movements. When they reached the door, I stepped out from behind a stack of crates. Calm, deliberate, the ring caught the dim streetlight. One of the men froze. Recognition fear passed across his face. "You don't understand who you're dealing with," one of them hissed. "I understand perfectly," I replied. "I know every name, every date, every lie." Their composure cracked, the briefcases dropped. They had come for leverage, thinking I was desperate. Instead, I held all the cards. Within hours, intermediaries from every corner of the network reached out, offering deals, threatening silence, offering immunity. Each conversation was precise. Each threat countered with the exact proof they could not deny. My father's recordings, documents, and the ring had given me control they hadn't anticipated. By dawn, news broke that high-ranking officials were under investigation. The city woke up to headlines exposing patterns of corruption that had been assumed untouchable. The same officials who had tried to trap me were now scrambling for cover, desperately trying to limit the damage. And I watched it all unfold from the shadows, fully aware that none of this would have been possible without the holding cell, the warden, and the ring that had started it all. The night closed in, but this time, I wasn't afraid, I was prepared. Every step, every risk, every sleepless hour had led to this moment. The balance had shifted, and justice, slow but relentless, was finally beginning to move. By the next night, the city itself felt different, as if the balance had shifted under everyone's feet. Those who had tried to bury me, erase me, and steal what was mine were now scrambling. Emails, phone calls, and internal alerts flew across offices, whispers of betrayal and fear growing louder by the hour. I stayed in the safe house, moving only when necessary. The ring on my finger felt heavier now, not because of its weight, but because of what it represented. Every document, every recording, every name I had memorized or transmitted had become a weapon against a network of corruption that had thrived for decades. The first confrontation came in the middle of the night. A car rolled silently up to the safe house. Two men, dressed as couriers, approached carrying nothing but briefcases. I knew instantly it was a trap. Their confidence gave them away. I let them approach, shadows hiding my movements. When they reached the door, I stepped out from behind a stack of crates. Calm, deliberate, the ring caught the dim streetlight. One of the men froze. Recognition fear passed across his face. "You don't understand who you're dealing with," one of them hissed. "I understand perfectly," I replied. "I know every name, every date, every lie." Their composure cracked, the briefcases dropped. They had come for leverage, thinking I was desperate. Instead, I held all the cards. Within hours, intermediaries from every corner of the network reached out, offering deals, threatening silence, offering immunity. Each conversation was precise. Each threat countered with the exact proof they could not deny. My father's recordings, documents, and the ring had given me control they hadn't anticipated. By dawn, news broke that high-ranking officials were under investigation. The city woke up to headlines exposing patterns of corruption that had been assumed untouchable. The same officials who had tried to trap me were now scrambling for cover, desperately trying to limit the damage. And I watched it all unfold from the shadows, fully aware that none of this would have been possible without the holding cell, the warden, and the ring that had started it all. The night closed in, but this time, I wasn't afraid, I was prepared. Every step, every risk, every sleepless hour had led to this moment. The balance had shifted, and justice, slow but relentless, was finally beginning to move. By the next few days, the pressure on the conspirators became unbearable. Offices once considered untouchable were now flooded with investigators and auditors. Calls meant to coordinate damage control turned into arguments, and whispered threats were met with icy silence. The system that had tried to crush me was collapsing from within. I remained in the safe house, constantly moving, But the warden's advice guided every decision. Precision over panic, strategy over emotion. Every piece of evidence I released had a calculated purpose. With each release, they stumbled further, exposing themselves without realizing it. Late one night, a new message arrived on the burner phone. It was a location, simple coordinates with a note, face them. I hesitated. This wasn't about hiding anymore. It was about confrontation. I knew who I would find there, one of the main architects of the plot to steal my property and frame me. The thought of revenge tempted me, but the warden's words echoed, expose them precisely. I arrived at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Several men waited, their faces sharp with anger and disbelief. They had thought I would cower, would beg, would disappear quietly. Instead, I walked in calmly, the drive in one hand, the ring glinting under the dim light. You thought you could erase me. I said, you thought that holding cell would end the problem. You were wrong. One man stepped forward, smirking. And what proof do you have? Everything you have is circumstantial. Who will believe you? I pressed a button on the drive. Screens flickered on, projecting documents, video recordings, and audio files across the walls. Names, signatures, evidence, everything meticulously compiled. They froze, their smirks faltered. Recognition replaced arrogance. This, I said, is not circumstantial. This is undeniable. Every illegal move, every conspiracy, every attempt to silence me has been documented. And it's just the beginning. Panic spread, phones began ringing, people trying to contact them, warnings coming in too late. They had underestimated how prepared I was. The ring had signaled the warden. The drive held my father's legacy, and my mind had turned fear into precision. You underestimated the one you locked in a cell. I continued. And tonight, you will know exactly what happens when lies are met with truth. As law enforcement arrived in waves, guided by the journalist and watchdogs I had contacted earlier, the men scrambled, no longer predators. They were prey, their connections, once hidden and powerful, were now exposed to scrutiny they could not escape. Standing there, watching the chaos I had orchestrated, I finally felt the weight lift from my shoulders. The holding cell, the threats, the fear, it had all led to this moment. Justice was not instantaneous, but it was exacting, deliberate, and unavoidable. And for the first time since my arrest, I smiled, knowing that the fight my father had started, the truth he had preserved, and the courage I had inherited were victorious. The final night had a stillness that felt almost surreal. Outside, the city was alive with the repercussions of the events I had set in motion. Investigations were underway. Arrests were being made, and names that had once been untouchable were now whispered in fear. I returned to the safe house one last time, placing the drive in a secure location known only to me. The ring on my finger caught the dim light, and I traced its surface thoughtfully. It had been a guide, a symbol, and a key to everything I had accomplished. Without it, I might never have been recognized by the warden, might never have had the leverage to turn the tide. Messages flooded in from the journalist, legal teams, and independent watchdogs. Every piece of evidence I had released was verified, shared, and used to bring the conspirators to justice. Those who had tried to manipulate and destroy me were now being dismantled systematically, their networks crumbling under the weight of proof. And yet, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about closure, about honoring my father's work and ensuring that no one could misuse the system as they had tried to misuse it against me. The warden appeared once more, quietly without ceremony. It's done, he said. You've done exactly what was needed. Precisely, the balance has shifted. I nodded, feeling the relief settle in. Though it was tempered by exhaustion, all of them, he replied, and the system is watching now. Corruption will take longer to rebuild. People like you, like your father, make sure of that. For a long moment, we stood in silence. No words could capture what had passed. The lives altered, the danger faced, and the victories earned. Finally, he turned and left, leaving me alone with the city, the night, and the quiet hum of justice being served. I looked out the window as the sun began to rise, casting gold across the skyline. The city felt different, alive, cautious, and a little more honest than it had the night before. I allowed myself a smile, a rare moment of peace after so many nights of fear and uncertainty. The holding cell, the threats, the betrayals, they had all led here. And I realized something profound. Courage, patience, and precision could overcome even the darkest plots. I clenched the ring once more and whispered to myself, this is the end of their game, but the beginning of a legacy. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt free.